back to the deep dive.
Great to be back.
This week, we're zooming in on something folks have asked about quite a bit: how cars actually get designed.
The process behind it all.
And, to really get the inside track, we're looking at the very latest from the experts at Bluewater Auto Restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Their brand new Bluewater Design Studio 3.1.
Right.
Think of this as like your personal tour through the digital tools the pros are actually using.
Exactly. And what's cool is our info today comes, well, straight from the source.
Okay.
We've been listening to Bluewater Auto Restoration's own weekly podcast.
Yeah.
This past Saturday was their 23rd installment for 2025.
23rd, wow. They're consistent.
Oh, yeah. Every Saturday morning, they're always sharing fresh takes, and we're pulling out the key bits about how they're using this updated Design Studio 3.1.
Gotcha. Specifically for like the nuts and bolts of designing a car.
Precisely. The intricacies.
So our mission today really is to unpack how a car starts taking shape digitally, specifically using this Bluewater Design Studio 3.1.
Let's do it.
Get ready to see how this software helps go from, just an idea to a full virtual model. Okay, so this sounds like a seriously powerful piece of software.
It seems to be.
When Bluewater Auto Restoration talks about designing a car with this, where do they even start?
Well, a big thing they emphasize is getting these incredibly realistic visuals right from the get-go.
Okay, visuals first.
Yeah, Bluewater highlights how crucial lifelike rendering is, and it really sounds like Design Studio 3.1 is built for that. They mention using something called true light materials.
True light material, like their own digital shaders and stuff?
Yeah, basically. Their own specialized digital shaders.
So if I'm picturing this, it's like having digital versions of all the car parts. The paint, the leather, chrome.
Exactly.
But these digital versions react to light just like the real thing.
Precisely. They explain that these are based on, actual real-world material property.
Oh.
So the designer doesn't need to be some kind of shader guru. They just pick from a library of materials.
Predefined stuff.
Yeah, that accurately mimic, say, different plastics or metal finishes.
Oh.
The same materials you'd actually touch in a real car.
Right.
And that really speeds up the whole visualization process early on.
Yeah, I can see that. Sounds super efficient, like having this perfectly sorted digital warehouse of real surfaces.
Pretty much.
What other visual design details does this Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 have?
Well, they also talk about measured materials.
Yeah.
Based on VCF files.
VCF files. Okay.
They didn't go into tons of detail there, but it suggests you can bring in highly accurate material data, maybe even from scans of physical samples,
Like scanning a piece of actual leather.
Could be. And another really fascinating bit is their skylight material.
Skylight.
Yeah, it can simulate lighting conditions based on actual times of day and, get this, geographic locations on Earth.
No way.
Yeah.
That's next level. So a designer could literally see how their car looks under like midday sun in Arizona.
Exactly. Or, a cloudy morning in Seattle, all inside the software.
Wow.
That kind of environmental control is, it's vital for really checking a design under different real-world conditions.
Sure, makes sense.
It helps make sure the car looks great, not just in perfect studio lighting, but also out on the road in all sorts of light.
Yeah, because that's where it'll actually be.
Right. So connecting this back, it lets designers make much smarter choices about colors, finishes, the overall shape.
Based on how light actually hits it in different places.
Exactly. Something that used to be way harder to predict accurately.
Okay, so we've got these incredibly real materials, super detailed lighting sims. What about movement? Cars aren't static, right?
Good point.
How does Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 handle animation?
They mentioned two things: a curve editor and a clip maker.
Okay.
The clip maker sounds like it's for more straightforward linear animations. Think wheels turning smoothly.
Got it.
Whereas the curve editor, that probably gives designers much finer nonlinear control over how things move. More complex stuff.
Yeah. Suggests a pretty sophisticated system for animating different parts, not just wheels, but maybe more complex actions too.
So like, if a designer wants to show how the suspension works over a bump,
Exactly.
or maybe how power windows glide up and down, these tools let them visualize that.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting, detail-wise. Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 can even import something called vertex animations.
Vertex animation.
Yeah, and they specifically mention compatibility with Maya caches.
Okay, Maya's a big animation tool, so this opens things up.
Big time. It means you can bring in these incredibly intricate, nuanced animations. Stuff maybe made in separate, dedicated animation software, then viewed right inside the design studio.
Vertex animation.
Yeah.
That does sound pretty advanced. What's the, like, practical advantage for car design?
Well, think about really subtle stuff. Deformations, complex mechanical movements, like the way a really nice leather seat wrinkles just so when someone sits down.
Oh, okay, yeah. Or the precise, almost ballet-like movement of a complex convertible roof folding away.
Right, those multi-stage ones.
Vertex animation gives you that super granular control over the shape's movement, much higher fidelity, than older techniques that just move rigid parts around.
That's an amazing level of detail. So, okay, we've covered materials, lighting, animation. What about just shaping the car itself? Creating those flowing lines, the curves. Does this Bluewater source mention those tools?
Well, this specific source doesn't really dive deep into the surface modeling tools within 3.1.
Okay.
But their heavy focus on visual realism, plus the ability to handle complex animations. It strongly implies the tools for actually creating and tweaking the 3D geometry must be pretty advanced.
Stands to reason, yeah.
And the fact they mentioned handling a large number of polygons efficiently for smooth performance that suggests a robust system for actually building and refining those complex car body shapes.
Which are crucial for modern design, absolutely. Okay, so we can assume the software handles complex 3D shapes well. Now, once you have this virtual car, how do you really get a feel for what it looks like beyond just the screen?
Right, that brings us to rendering, actually creating the final image.
Okay.
Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 uses three main light types: direct lights, area lights, and object lights.
Different ways to light the scene.
Yeah, gives designers good control.
Yeah.
And they use a sophisticated technique called photon tracing.
Photon tracing. Sounds fancy.
It is. It simulates indirect illumination, how light bounces around, and generates really convincing reflections and shadows.
So it's trying to be super accurate about how light actually behaves in that virtual space.
Exactly right. It simulates how light particles, photons, travel and bounce off surfaces in the real world, leads to much more accurate, more visually pleasing results, especially when lighting gets complex. Lots of reflections and refractions happening.
And connecting that back to Bluewater auto restoration's work.
Well, this advanced rendering is key for producing those super high-quality, almost photographic images they're known for showing off.
Makes sense. And I saw they mentioned a direct connection to something called HDR Light Studio. What's the benefit there?
Yeah. HDR Light Studio is a specialized tool just for creating these high-dynamic, range HDR lighting environments.
Okay, focused on lighting.
Right. So this integration lets designers easily build their own custom, super detailed lighting setups. Then they just bring them seamlessly into Bluewater Design Studio 3.1.
Seamless is good.
And they even highlight this ability to, quote, light paint directly onto the car's surface using this plugin.
Light painting. That sounds really interactive, even in digital. How's that work?
It basically lets you shape the reflections you see on the car's virtual surfaces. You directly manipulate light sources in that HDR environment.
So you're like dragging lights around.
Kind of. And you get real-time feedback on how tweaking the lighting changes the highlights, the shadows, the whole look.
Instant feedback.
It gives designers a very intuitive, almost artistic way to fine-tune the visual impact. It's a great way to bridge that gap between, technical precision and artistic feel.
That sounds like a beautiful combination. Technical accuracy, but with real artistic control.
Okay, so we've got this stunningly rendered car, perfectly lit virtual studio. What's next in visualizing it?
The next really crucial piece is the virtual camera system.
The camera.
Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 boasts what they call real camera parameters, meaning designers who know photography can use familiar settings like aperture, f-stop, shutter speed, focal length, all controllable on the virtual camera.
So it's not just some generic viewpoint in 3D space. It's like a real camera simulation with its optical traits.
Precisely. And that's what unlocks photographic techniques like motion blur.
The streaky look on moving things.
Yeah. And depth of field.
Where you focus on one thing, blur the background.
Exactly. Both add a huge layer of realism to the renders, the images, and animation. Directs the viewer's eye, too. Those are definitely the kind of subtle things that make a digital image feel, photorealistic. It's impressive that's all baked right into the design software.
And speaking of keeping everything together, in one workflow, Bluewater Design Studio 3.1 also includes a pretty powerful post-processing toolset.
Post-processing, like photo editing.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It lets designers make those final tweaks to the images, fine-tuning color balance, adding subtle effects, maybe a vignette,
Yeah, okay.
and they can do it without having to export the render to like Photoshop or something else.
So it really is aiming to be this comprehensive all-in-one solution, from the 3D model right to the final polished picture.
That's definitely the impression Bluewater Auto Restoration gives. They stress being able to finalize high-end pictures entirely within Design Studio 3.1.
Which saves a lot of jumping between programs, streamlines things.
Usually, yeah, streamlines the whole process for the user.
Now, okay, when you're dealing with scenes this complex, aiming for photorealism, rendering itself can take ages, right?
Oh yeah, rendering time is always a factor.
How does the software tackle that challenge?
They mention using render passes and render layers, which are really key for efficient rendering and post-production.
Render passes, render layers, how do those help?
Okay, so render passes let you output different parts of the final image separately. Like just the reflections is one file, just the shadows is another, just the raw color.
Components.
Yeah, and render layers let you isolate specific objects, like maybe just the wheels or just the windows, and render them on their own.
Okay, so if a designer needs to subtly tweak the reflections on, say, just the windshield, they could just re-render that reflection pass or maybe a windshield layer and then combine it later without re-rendering the whole complex car and scene.
Exactly right. That gives you tremendous flexibility and control in those final stages.
Saves a ton of time, I bet.
Definitely. And it makes fixing rendering issues easier too. You can look at the individual passes to see where a problem might be.
Like debugging the image.
Pretty much. They even mention a live channel in the software that shows, in real time, which parts of the image are being calculated most intensely.
That sounds super useful for optimizing settings, finding bottlenecks, like a little dashboard for the render engine.
Precisely. And one more thing on efficiency, they briefly mention a sequencer for batch rendering.
Batch rendering.
Yeah, setting up multiple render jobs to run automatically.